Right, thank you once again, colleagues, for attending the Children Learning Committee on the 18th of May 2021. Apologies or substitutions?
Yes, Convener, we have apologies from Councillors Laurie and Lumgear, with Councillors Boyd and Fotheringham substituting. There's also an apology from Miss Leslie Hood.
Great, thank you. Declarations of interest? I take it that's none. Okay, we'll move on. Right, minutes of previous meeting. Are these agreed as an accurate record?
Agreed.
Agreed.
Thank you. Right, just before we get into the first information report, I'd just like to welcome Sarah Morgan, who's joining us today at the committee. Sarah Morgan is the newly appointed Acting Service Leader for Early Years, and Sarah's substantive role is Head Teacher of Southwest Primary School, and most recently she has been seconded to the Angus Virtual School. Welcome along, Sarah.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Information report for the period 6th of March to the 4th of May 2021. Is Mark Armstrong there? Do you want to introduce the paper?
Yes, thank you, Convener and committee. I'm pleased to bring this information report to your attention, really to keep the committee informed of the progress that's been made following the independent care review and the promise that was published in February earlier last year, and then updated with the plan in relation to our care experienced young people that was published earlier this year, and really just advising the committee at this stage of the progress that's been made in relation to both the promise and the plan, and the significant impact that the plan and the commitments and aspirations that are detailed in there will have on all of our services and support for not just our care experienced young people, but all of our young people, and really to make the committee aware of these developments and advise that we will be bringing detailed reports back after the summer recess in terms of how we would propose to reflect the commitments and aspirations of the promise and the plan in our future corporate parenting work and other work in relation to children's services and services for young people. So it's really just to keep the committee aware at this point and to advise that we will be bringing further more detailed reports after the summer, and we already have a meeting scheduled with senior members of the Promise team that will take place in June this year.
Okay, thank you. Is Catherine Lindsay want to say anything further on this?
No, thanks. I think the deck covered it. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Catherine. Any questions we have in that paper? Councillor Bell?
Thank you. Sorry, it took a while to get unmuted there. Thank you, Mark, for that. I think this is a hugely important step in helping us to develop the promise. When that next report comes up and all subsequent reports, I'd be really keen to see the views of young people captured in that. Just wanted a bit of reassurance that will be there, if that's okay.
Through you, Chair, yes, certainly, Councillor Bell, more than happy to give that commitment, and certainly the views of young people have been feeding in strongly to the work of the Angus Corporate Parenting Board, and we had already identified that when we do bring these reports, it's an ideal opportunity to present in detail, either directly or through other means, the direct views of young people who have real experience of our care system. So that is a key aspect of how we wish to take this work forward, and more than happy to make that commitment.
Thank you, Mark. Can I ask Councillor Proctor next?
Thank you very much, Convener. I hope I don't switch on to mute. Again, I'd just like to thank Mr. Armstrong and all the team who've produced this excellent information report. I think it's well worth noting that there's a lot of young folk in Angus and elsewhere who don't have the benefit of a happy and stable family life, and this goes a long way to help bettering that. And I think that the 5 areas that are listed in paragraph 1 are really, really relevant and pertinent. The right to have a childhood, have whole family support, support in the workforce, planning and building the capacity. I think these are all very, very important, and I welcome the full report to come forward in the future. And I'd just like to thank once again all those being involved in producing this. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Proctor. Right, is that everybody's questions and comments on that one? Anything further? No. Can I ask Councillor Proctor? That's it, his hand's down, thank you. Okay, on agenda item 5, education, recovery and resilience update. Beth Reader's going to introduce this. If I can ask Beth to introduce the paper, please.
Thank you, Councillor Wan. This report provides members of the committee with an update on education, recovery and resilience. It's the latest in a series of reports that we've done, and the paper details the arrangements which have been in place to support learning and teaching and our children and families throughout the current school session. And section 5 in this report, if we can just draw your attention to that, also sets out some details about our planning for the way forward into session 21-22 as well, and makes reference to some of the key national documentation driving that, including the National Improvement Framework and the Scottish Government's Equity Audit. So myself and obviously colleagues are happy to take any questions.
Thank you very much, Beth. Yeah, great report. Can I ask for questions first? Is it Councillor Devine? Is it a question?
Yes, it is. Although I would like to say what an excellent report it is, and I mean it shows just how much work has had to be done behind the scenes with all the different grants coming in at all different times, and we really do appreciate the work that you've done on that. On page 14, 4.17, I was concerned about the small-ish number of people who'd taken advantage of the educational psychology service and Together All. And now I do understand that in schools there are counsellors, and probably the work that's being done in schools is keeping that number down. However, I'm just a wee bit concerned because Together All actually goes up to 24. So I was wondering if there might be an opportunity to advertise it more widely for that older age group who can't be helped in school. Can I go on to, I've just got one other wee thing, convener, if you don't mind.
Yeah, sure.
It's on the top of page 18, where it talks about, and this is government wording, to employ early years practitioners to help embed play-based pedagogy in early primary. Now, I know in Angus actually, and I feel that people out there should also know that play-based pedagogy has already been embedded in primaries 1 and probably into 2 in some instances. So I would appreciate maybe just a little bit more explanation on that for people to know about it. Thank you.
Beth, are you happy to
Thank you, Councillor Wynne. I'm actually going to ask a couple of colleagues to come in. I'll ask Audrey Osborne to come in for the first part of the question, and then Sarah Morgan will pick up the second part, if that's okay.
Sure.
Councillor Devine, thank you for your question. In terms of the Educational Psychology Service phone line, I have some updated stats for you. So since Easter, since we've returned from Easter, there have been only 10 calls, 3 in week 1, 6 in week 2, 9 in week 3 and 1 in week 4. A lot of the earlier calls were around anxiety about returning to school, and obviously now that children and young people are back in school and have the support that's available in school, then we would have expected those calls to diminish, and that's actually what's happening. And the calls that we're getting currently are being redirected to school. Educational psychology services are continuing to provide support to children and young people and staff in schools, and that's the best route to access that support. In terms of the Together All, I think you're absolutely right. When we advertised it Tayside wide, then the increase went up in uptake as well when it went out in comms across Tayside, and there's no reason why we can't do that again. However, we are having quarterly reports from the counselling in schools, and I think now that things become established, we'll get more up-to-date data about that, and also from Together All with a breakdown of who's using it, what for, and to what end. But I think you're right, we can continue to promote through comms and do that on a Tayside-wide basis, as it's a Tayside-wide service.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Sarah?
Yeah, thank you, Councillor Devine. Thank you for your question. I think just to further explain, obviously, the importance of play experiences and how it supports the development of a huge amount of range across from executive functioning skills to motor, social, emotional, language and communication skills. By providing EYAs in primary one, it would build upon the practice that we've currently already been working on across Angus. In nursery, children have a 1 to 8 adult to child ratio for children aged 3 to 5, but in P1 this is 1 to 25. So the additional staffing would facilitate meaningful play experiences, allow to build upon children's interactions, environments with skilled adults who can observe their play and engage with them to take the learning forward. It would also allow to build upon outdoor experiences as well by having staffing in primary one that actually would mean that we could build upon existing good practice for supporting children's wellbeing and learning in primary one with outdoor facilities as well.
Yeah, thank you. Sarah. Is that okay, Councillor Devine?
Yep. Thanks.
Next on my list, Councillor Whiteside, please.
Thanks, convener. I just wanted to say as well, a lot of information is in this report. We could probably talk about it for a long time. There was a couple of things I wanted to pick up on. Item 4.13, I actually thought in the great scheme of things that the number of cases that we've had in Angus schools has been quite surprisingly low, and I think that's a good measure of the risks, risk assessments that were obviously done and how we've managed risks. It might be worth having a reminder just how many pupils and staff we've actually got across Angus. The other point I wanted to pick up on was I was a little bit worried to see on page 16 the number of additional children and young people living in an eligible household for free meals, and I think that flags up some issues about our families in general in Angus and the hardships they're facing. And is this something that's causing a lot of concern across the council? Thanks.
I bet you'd like to come in on that.
Yes, thank you, Councillor Wan and Councillor Whiteside. So in terms of our school population, we've got around 15,500 children and young people, and around about, so that's just from primary one upwards, and I think around 2,000 nursery children. So our numbers are low when put into the context of that, and staffing, we're around the 2,000 mark. So not an insignificant population, but we've worked really closely with our partners within the council, within the safety team, and also public health to ensure that we've got the most appropriate mitigations in place. And of course, our head teachers and their school staff have done an excellent job in putting everything in place. So we provide the guidance and the risk assessments, but it's our school colleagues that actually make that happen. So I think this is stands to show the work that they've been doing as well. In terms of the preschool meal eligibility, it is quite an increase, and it's something that's being picked up through a number of different channels within the council. We obviously have the Child Poverty Action Group that's looking at this, and we're working within our own directorate and with partners to see how we can most appropriately support families. We're doing a lot with welfare rights. We're trying to publicise what benefits are out there and how people can access them, us encouraging people to check their eligibility. But I think it's also important to note that we're supporting people who are not eligible for support under standard financial criteria, but we have other mechanisms in place for them as well. So we can provide kind of case-by-case support where necessary. And I think it's important to say that our head teachers and school colleagues know their families better than ever at the moment, so we're able to put quite targeted support in place where appropriate. And if within 4.30 in the report, we reference the discretionary grants that have been given to schools, and they're being deployed in a range of different ways to provide support to families. That may be food support, and there are breakfast clubs in place, but there's also clothing support. It's kind of whatever is needed in the local community. That's just some of the ways we're addressing that.
Thank you, Beth. Is that okay, Councillor Whiteside?
Yeah, thanks. That's really reassuring. Thanks, Beth.
Councillor Bell.
Thank you. And again, lots of detail in here, and I fully appreciate that the staffing may be a bit like three-dimensional chess, but I have a couple of queries on that, if you can help, Beth. Are they truly additional posts, or are we utilising existing staff who are perhaps on a short-term contract? Have we been able to employ any newly qualified teachers, for example, and what's the length of the contract that we're being able to offer? I just wondered how mixed a model we've been able to develop to fill those additional roles. If you can answer that, please.
I am actually going to hand over to Jim Hammond to pick up on that, if that's okay, Jim, because he'll have all the detail on that.
I can. Just in relation to the mix of contracts, for this year, we've employed overall about 32 FTE teachers over primary and secondary, with about 23.4 in the primary sector. These have been short-term contracts. They've all been additional posts to our existing staffing establishment and the baseline staffing we've got for the primary sector. They will end at the summer. So it's been 1 year contracts to match the 1 year funding that was initially had. Clearly the papers today are around additional monies are there and delegation to go ahead and allocate these monies appropriately. And we'll be looking at over the course of the next few weeks about best how we're going to spend that money. Just as an aside, of the teachers who are in the system this year, 9 have been allocated to jobs for next year, which are part of the base budget. So their prospects are looking good. 2 further ones will be filled through vacancies. We've got PT posts coming up, and we'll need to provide cover for that. So we've still got 15 seeking posts within that, and we've got the current probationers. But we'll look at the round and the monies that are available and how best to target need with the grant monies that are available for next session. These posts again will be on a temporary basis.
Thank you, Jim. Councillor Braze.
Yes, thanks, convener. Yes, a huge amount of information in here reflecting the enormous challenge that we've had to face, and done so very well. I note in the list of recommendations at number 6, where we're asked to approve delegation, it says including the capitalisation of £35,000 to meet IT costs, and we learn later in the report that this is for Citrix licenses, etc. And I just wanted a wee bit of clarity as to why the term capitalisation has been used for this £35,000. Thank you.
I'm happy to take that if that's okay, Councillor Wan. It's just in the context of how that type of IT expenditure would be dealt with in accounting terms. That's purely the reason for it, because it's considered part of the infrastructure as opposed to a revenue spend. Yes,
so is this a one-off payment to buy these licenses, and that's why it's in capital? Okay, then.
Yes, it was. Just to explain a little bit, went into lockdown in March last year. We had no way to facilitate remote access to CMIS, which is quite critical for kind of providing support to children from home, and working with our IT colleagues. The Citrix licenses was a solution to enable that access to happen, to avoid us needing to allow people to go into school or anything like that. So yeah, one-off, not recurring.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Beth. And finally, I have Councillor Sturrock, please.
Thank you, convener. It relates to 417, section 417, the psychology service. Since it's began, has there been a predominant issue reported as the anxiety, progress with learning, etc., or is it too early to tell at the present time?
Audrey, would you like to answer that one?
Yes, thank you, Councillor Sturrock. Mainly about anxiety, I think. Initially, it was about, when children will return to school, what will that look like? What will the mitigations be in place? But of course, as children and young people have returned to school, a lot of those fears have been allayed, and some just worried about, what their children, in terms of their progress, and just making sure that they're tapping into the support that's available to them. But mostly initially around anxiety and getting back to school, but those calls have lessened off as children and young people have returned to school, which is what we would have expected. They're getting the support they need whilst in school and from the people that know them best.
Okay, fine, thank you.
Thank you.
Councillor Sturrock. Any comments on the paper? That's questions finished? No. No. Okay, we have 7 recommendations to approve on the paper. Well, I'll read them out actually. Number 1, notes the updates set out in section 4 and section 5 and request that the Director of Education and Lifelong Learning prepares further updates as required. Recommendation 2, approves the employment of the circa of 20 full-time additional teachers and circa 10.5 additional support staff at an estimated cost of 1.171 million. And approves the delegation of Education Recovery Annex A and B funding to the Director of Education, Lifelong and Learning to meet the costs. 3, approves the delegation of up to 1.258 million Education Recovery Grant funding to the Director of Education and Lifelong Learning for planning of expenditure on additional staffing. 4, approves the delegation of up to £335,000 for summer holiday activity grant funding to the Director of Education. Number 5, requests that the Director of Education and Lifelong Learning brings a report to a future committee outlining how the above monies have been deployed. Number 6, approves the delegation of up to 2.151 million on education logistics grant funding to the Director of Education and including the capitalisation of 35,000 to meet the IT costs, which we just had explained. And 7, approves the delegation of up to 300,000 Education Recovery Annex A funding to the Director of Education and notes the capitalisation of this funding to purchase Chromebooks and iPads to meet the immediate need. Is this agreed?
Agreed.
Thank you, Councillor Devine. Okay, agenda item 6, the Alternative Certification Model 2021. We have 2 recommendations on this. Can I ask Lorraine Will to introduce the paper, please?
Thank you, Convener. I'm pleased to have the opportunity to bring this report to your attention today. The Alternative Certification Model, or ACM, as it's come to be known, for National 5, Higher and Advanced Higher has replaced exams this year due to the impact of COVID-19. This means that teachers will decide each learner's provisional results by judging the assessment evidence gathered and checking the results with other staff in their own school and across schools. This report outlines the quality assurance process that is in place across Angus to give confidence that there is consistency across our schools on how grades are awarded. The additional in-service days will provide valuable time for this work. Across Angus, school staff are committed to supporting our young people to achieve the best possible grades they deserve while maintaining the integrity of the qualifications. To support our young people, schools will review all the assessments completed over the year to determine the provisional grades that will be submitted. They will provide final assessments in some subjects over May and June to give our young people the best chance of making the progress they need to achieve their awards. The assessments will take timetabled classes, and while they won't replicate exams, they will be carefully administered to ensure fairness. Schools have already put in place alternative arrangements for pupils who require additional support, who have suffered absence or have other exceptional circumstances. Every effort will be made to make sure all pupils complete their assessments before the end of June. All the arrangements for assessments have been shared with parents and carers, and frequently asked questions, which were developed in consultation with a group of young people, are on the Angus Council website. The ACM arrangements and guidance in place across Angus have been endorsed and commended by HMIE during a recent national review. The collaboration of the principal teachers across our Angus schools will be highlighted as good practice in the national report, and it really is testament to the hard work and professionalism of our staff to get it right for the young people of Angus during such a challenging time. I'm happy to take any questions. Thank you.
Thank you for that, Lorraine. Yes, and it's great to hear that HMIE have commended us on your work there and everybody else's work. It's in the Education Department. So just on behalf of the committee, thank you for that. Any questions? I have Councillor Whiteside.
Thanks, convener, and thanks for that, Lorraine. It's quite reassuring to see the report. I'm just wondering if you're finding that there's quite a lot of confidence from the teachers and carers about the systems that have been put in place. Do you think everybody's quite happy with it?
Thanks for your question, Councillor Whiteside. Yes, I mean, we've been collaborating closely. You can imagine that we're very fortunate in Angus that we already had good networks in place. So we have principal teacher groups that meet regularly across schools, and they have been working closely to make sure that everyone is confident that the assessments we're using are an agreed and shared standard across our schools. They're also supporting each other with sort of cross-marking and sampling of grades. And our schools are communicating regularly with parents to make sure that parents have all the information about how things are progressing. The schools have also been giving regular updates to young people and parents progress in learning. And the goal there is that come summer, there will be no surprises, and that the young people know where they are right now and what they need to do still to get the grades that they hope to achieve. So we're all working closely together, and I feel confident that we're communicating as effectively as we can. So I hope that answers your question.
Thanks. Thanks very much. That does.
Thank you. And I can actually just say that everything that's been said there is 100% true. To have my daughter who's doing 5th year hires, and the school has been excellent, and everybody's been keeping in touch, and report cards coming through every now and again letting us know how she's getting on with assessments. So yeah, thank you for that. Next question, Councillor Bell, please.
Thank you, and thanks, Lorraine. And I can't help but think that if I'd had this mechanism when I was at school, I might have done a lot better at it. And I know exams are quite stressful, but I also know that there is quite a lot of anxiety out there across the piece, and I hope people find this very reassuring. I just wondered how apart from HMIE, how you're tapping into national networks around the development of this model, because it does seem that there's an excellent range of steps and interventions that could be made to tweak the model if it's not working, or if things are proving to be an anomaly, and how you're using maybe the national network as a sounding board to help flex that. And thanks very much for your hard work on it.
Yes, just supposed to give a bit more context. I have been working very closely with colleagues in Dundee and in Perth as part of the TAE collaborative, and we have actually within the guidance there is an element of our moderation process that allows teachers, particularly in those subjects where there are maybe very few teachers across Angus, they can link in with staff across the TAE collaborative to add in that extra element of moderation. My colleague in Dundee that I've been liaising with as part of that Tayside collaborative also sits on the National Regional Collaborative Board. So she's liaising for us and double checking that all of the arrangements we have in place are as they should be. And we also have the opportunity this year where SQA are coming into our schools to sample the assessments and the sort of the provisional grades that we're awarding. And each school is just being asked for a range of subjects at a range of levels, but across Tayside we're able to gather that feedback so that all schools can tap into that. So we really are trying to network as widely as possible, and I do also attend national meetings to get updates from SQA, etc. So yeah, I think we're tapping into as much as we can at this point, and it has been really supportive though to work with those colleagues so closely across Tayside to ensure that we're getting it right across the piece.
Yeah, thank you, Lorraine, for that. That seems to be all the questions that we have. Does anybody have any comments before we go on to the recommendations? Okay, no comments seem to be coming up. Councillor Braze, you did have your hand up, didn't you? Or was that? No.
Well, I did actually, convener. It was just to echo what you said about my daughter's going through assessments. Plenty of information from the school. I have to say, getting information from her is like getting blood from a stone. But no, really reassuring to hear what's going on. Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you, Councillor Brace. Right, we have two recommendations on this paper. One is to review the Angus Alternative Certification Model Guidance, and number two, notes the quality assurance process outlined in the Angus Alternative Certification Model. Are these agreed?
Agreed.
Thank you. Okay, agenda item 7. We'll have Kirsty Lee will introduce this paper. It's on the grant funding to support children, young people and families. Kirsty Lee.
Great, thanks, Councillor Wan. So the report briefs members on supports available for vulnerable children and families in Angus. The first part reports on how 2 one-off grants have been used to support local children and families with the social and mental health impacts of COVID-19. So you'll see from the report, the first grant, which is social protection funding for vulnerable children. So these grants were made available across Scotland to chief social work officers with the specific criteria of supporting children in our local authority care, to support the delivery of children's hearings and generally to support our vulnerable families. So in managing this fund, we consulted with partners in shaping the spending plan. And it really ensured that we were able to staff our residential houses and provision for children to make sure that children were well supported. And also families and communities had access to enhanced supports from third sector providers. The second grant that's referenced in the paper that you have is support for mental health and wellbeing impacts for children and families. And again, we've worked in partnership in the council and with external partners to deliver a range of supports. And these have included extending our third sector services, importantly ensuring that there's support for transitions for young people who have been out of school, and ensuring that women and children affected by domestic abuse have access to support. And there's details of the spending for each of those 2 short-term funds contained within the report. Both these funds, as you can see, are short-term monies for the last financial year with some carry forward into this year. And we're in the process of assessing impacts from these 2 grants, so we can report back to Scottish Government.
Okay, thank you. I think there's an element for Audrey Osborne to introduce as well, is there?
I think Kirsty's probably covered it, so unless there are specific questions.
Yeah. Okay, if we have any questions, we have Kirsty Lee or Audrey Osborne that can answer them. Councillor Bell.
Thank you very much, both. Thanks, Kirsty. CAMS is mentioned quite a bit, and about young people who are waiting for assessment. And also the fact that the service is looking at a whole system review. One of the biggest issues, I think, is the waiting time to get into CAMS, and that obviously gives me huge concern. And I wondered if you had any update to give us on that, and what work has been achieved to date to reduce that waiting time, and also some detail on what is being provided to people who are on that waiting list, because it's a very scary time for young people and for their families.
Yeah,
I can take that. Thank you, Councillor Bell. One of the identified criterion from the framework for community mental health and wellbeing is to work collaboratively with CAMS to address some of those issues that you've just outlined. So we have been working closely with our NHS colleagues and colleagues across Tayside from the Tayside Collaborative. And one of the areas that we've identified, as you rightly say, is a need for children aged 5 to 12 who are awaiting neurodevelopmental assessment. So that could be a diagnosis of autism or ADHD or any other disorder. And we recognise that there are long waiting lists. And rather than have these parents and their children on lists for 18 months, then to work with CAMS to provide some kind of platform that would provide early intervention resources and support to look at, things that they could be doing, strategies that they could be using before they're assessed, and during and after intervention. And that kind of resource would be available for parents, carers, for teachers in our schools to access, and for young people themselves. So actually, I have a meeting directly after committee today with CAMS and with Tayside colleagues to take that bit of work forward. I'm also aware that CAMS have been given their own funding to look at addressing some of the issues that have been identified through that service review, and they're working hard on trying to reduce those waiting times. It's also about recognising the range of supports that are available and making sure that appropriate referrals are going through to CAMS as well. And our emotional health and wellbeing strategy outlines, it's in draft just now, but outlines that whole continuum of need so that the right support is given at the right time and to the right children, and it's not inappropriate referrals that are going through to CAMS. So we are working together with them to try and address some of these issues.
Convener, could I come back in there briefly? Sure. Thank you, Audrey. I think this committee would benefit from hearing about that work in greater detail at some point if there was agreement. It's such an important issue, and we keep talking about mental health in young people, and I for one would really appreciate maybe a briefing out with the committee setting or something like that, with approval from the convener, because I'm sure we all care deeply about this and would love to see, you know, that holistic improvement for our young people when they're at their most vulnerable.
Sure, yeah, Councillor Bell, I would agree with that. Audrey and Kirsty Lee, you'd like to maybe organise something that the whole, not just the committee, the whole the council committee would be invited along to some briefing out with this committee, that would be perfect.
Absolutely happy to take that forward. It will be dependent on our colleagues in NHS and CAMS in terms of what they can share of their plans of where they are. But we work closely with Diane Caldwell, who's the head of CAMS. I'm sure she'd be happy to work with us in providing some further information for you.
Okay, that'd be brilliant. Thank you, Audrey.
Convener, I just like to make a comment just to again to welcome the support, because it gives those children and young people the opportunity to level up. Now, notwithstanding what Councillor Bell said, and I do take cognizance of the fact that there is waiting time, there's uncertainty, but I think that's been fairly well answered by Audrey, and the fact that there would be a briefing to council members in the future would alleviate that. So I do feel that this is a good step, a big step in the right direction, and I would commend the report. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Proctor. I've got Catherine Lindsay's hand up. Yes, Catherine. Can't see you on screen, but you must be here.
No, I am here.
Yeah.
So I just wanted to come in to reiterate the point that Audrey Osborne made, which is that the child and adolescent mental health services, of course, are NHS services as opposed to council services. So our engagement with our colleagues in NHS Tayside is to see what we can do to support a pathway of earlier intervention. And I'm quite happy with the suggestion that Audrey made that through our integrated children's services arrangements, which are partnership arrangements, we can explore the extent to which colleagues in NHS Tayside would be able to support a briefing to elected members in that regard. Thank you.
Thank you, Catherine. Councillor Devine, sorry, I see your hand up. Yeah.
That's okay. I'm just so very pleased to hear about this extra support being given to people on the waiting list, because as a former teacher many years ago, it was quite intolerable, the length of time people had to wait and how anxious they became. So this has been a long time coming, but I absolutely endorse what you're saying. It's absolutely great. And I'd also like to just thank people for bringing this paper and letting us see the wide range of help that is available through the tables 1 and 2 that we can see in front of us. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Councillor Devine. Audrey, you've got your hand up. Do you want to come back in? Yeah.
Yes, thank you, Councillor Wan. I just wanted to make the point that longer term, it'll be interesting to see whether the provision of counselling in schools has any impact on direct referrals to CAMS, and whether that there would be a reduction over time. It's far too early to say, but that's one of the trends that we would be certainly looking at.
Thank you. Thank you. Okay, that seems to be all the questions and comments. We have 3 recommendations to consider. Number 1 is note the spending plan for winter plan for social protection, funding for vulnerable children approved they carry forward. Number 2, note the spending plan for mental health and wellbeing impacts of COVID-19. And 3, approve the Angus Mental Health and Wellbeing Programme initial plan. Are they agreed?
Agreed.
Agreed.
Thank you. Agenda item number 8, school terms and holidays for 22 to 25, the consultation outcome. And Beth Reader is going to introduce this paper. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Wan. An update to the paper which was considered at this committee in November last year, and as agreed by the committee, a consultation was carried out in March of this year to seek agreement or otherwise of the proposed term and holiday dates. As you'll see in the report, the response rate was good and indicated 80% support for the proposals. And as part of the consultation, we also provided an opportunity to make comments about the proposals as well. So the report recommends accepting the proposed date, but also responds to the comments raised as well. Happy to take any questions.
Thank you, Beth. Does anybody have any questions on the school terms and holidays? No, it looks as though you're getting off with this one, Beth. Thank you. We have 1 recommendation, and that's just to approve the full school terms and holiday dates. Are they approved?
Approved.
Thank you.
Councillor Wan, I was expecting to be able to make a comment.
Actually, Councillor Boyd, I expected you to make a comment. I was surprised that your hand didn't go up, but we won't go through the normal procedure and we'll let you off this time.
Well, I've been thrown out 3 times already. I'm now on my...
My apologies for that. I won't do it a 4th.
So, no, I was just to say, it was good to see this report. It was good to see consultation done. I think there were 79 people that consulted back. It's slightly different to the 4,398 that wrote back 5.5 years ago when the October or the famous tatty holidays in Angus, and it was great to see. So it's good to see that we went back for consultation, but it's good to see that the vast majority of people are still there. I think it's excellent we're still having our tatty holidays different to everyone else. As I mentioned, these 5.5 years ago, it equates to the savings that for a family of 4 that could afford the holiday in October, basically because they can't afford the holiday in the summer, equates to this annual savings of their entire council tax bill. And that's whether they're going on a caravan up the Glens or they can afford to go to Florida. But I think this is excellent news that we're still sticking with the status quo, and long may we save the tatty holidays in Angus. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Boyd. And that's something we discussed at pre-agenda, actually, was the timing of the autumn holidays, the tatty holidays, as you called it. So I don't think many folk go tatty picking anymore, but yeah, thank you, Councillor Boyd. Okay, we'll move on. That one was approved. So we have agenda item 9, which is the Early Years Expansion Programme update. We've got 2 recommendations to consider, and the paper for this one will be introduced by Jamie Aitchison, please. Jamie is here.
Thank you very much, Councillor Wan. We are delighted to be able to bring this report to committee. It's the 4th and final annual report on progress in the early years expansion in Angus. Last year, the Scottish Government confirmed that because of the pandemic, the legislative requirement on local authorities to implement the expansion had been withdrawn, and that was ultimately delayed until August of this year. The vast majority of councils across Scotland took that opportunity to delay their implementation by up to 1 year, which gave them some valuable time to finish their construction projects and to get their extra staff in place. In Angus, because we had done the better part of that work already, we requested the approval of this committee last summer to proceed with implementing the expansion as planned in August last year, and we were delighted to have the support of this committee in taking that forward. This move has very clearly paid off in Angus, because since August, Angus children have been enjoying up to 30 hours a week of high quality early learning and childcare across our wide range of school nurseries, our 2 new ELC centres which were completed just a couple of months ago, and our significantly expanded framework of partner providers, including childminders. With the completion of some of the minor remaining building works this summer, the early years expansion in Angus will come to a successful conclusion. We would like to thank the members of this committee for their support in helping us to deliver the programme for the children and families of Angus. So thank you, and I'm happy to take any questions on the report.
Thank you, Jamie. I would just like to thank you on behalf of your team, and obviously Victoria, who's now gone, but we were always kept well up to date what was happening, and I think it was a great decision that was made to carry on in August to carry on with the early years learning hours for the people Angus. So thank you very much, Jamie, and your team. Can I open the floor up to any questions? Councillor Devine, I think just came in first. I'm not sure, but carry on.
I did. I was just wondering, Jamie, when there might be a chance to see round the Forfar place, because, I mean, under normal circumstances, we would have been able to see it, but because of the pandemic, we couldn't. And it looked so exciting. So I'd really love the opportunity to be able to see round.
Yes, Councillor Devine, you're not the only one. I would love to be able to see around as well. I had hoped with the move to level 2 in Angus last week that might be the point where we could have councillor visits, but I'm advised that Scottish Government haven't quite updated their guidance to that degree yet. As soon as it's possible for you to visit, we'll get that in the diary. No,
that'd be great, Jamie, and I think we'd all like to see Carnoustie as well because of the shoot, especially the shoot. Councillor Boyd. You're still on mute, Councillor Boyd.
That was, I had the similar question, and then can I then therefore go on to a comment?
If we're finished all questions, you just carry on, Councillor Boyd.
Yeah, so, yeah, it was the same thing as what Councillor Devine has said. I'm so excited about trying to get in to see the £5 million early learning centre at Carnoustie at the right end of the town as well, where we have the people that don't have all the big 4x4s to go and to get their kids to school. So it took a long time, 7 years in the making, to make sure the west end of the town were well catered for, and I'm absolutely thrilled. And I just also want to say personally thank you to Jamie, who had worked a power over the last 4 or 5 years. I know we're talking about the last year of this, but Jamie, without you, Carnoustie wouldn't have had this £5 million. Or you were a big contributor to making sure that finance was all there, and so I must thank you very much for that. As I mentioned the other day, it's good to see that officers will listen to councillors. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Councillor Boyd.
Did Councillor Boyd mean you contributed to the £5 million, Jamie?
I can possibly say.
Yeah. Okay, we have 2 recommendations on that report. Thank you, Jamie. Notes the content of the report, number 1, and notes that as the most significant elements of the programme are now complete, this will be the final annual update of the early years expansion in Angus. Are we agreed?
Agreed.
Thank you very much.
Well done, Jamie.
Thank you. We're on to the final report, which is the Tayside Plan for Children, Young People and Families. And there are 2 recommendations in this, but before we have the paper introduced, can I just take this moment again on behalf of the committee, I hope, to thank Kirsty Lee and all our team for the hard work that's went into preparing these reports, because there's an awful lot of work in here. And just like every report that we get to Children Learning Committee, we do get a lot of information at this committee, I believe, and it's all very worthwhile reading. So, Kirsty, can I ask you to take over and introduce, please?
Thank you for that feedback, Councillor Wan. Yeah, so you'll see here we have the Tayside Collaborative Annual Report for 2019-20, and we're seeking committee approval. Similar reports will be presented to our neighbouring councils in Dundee and Perth and Kinross. The second part is there was a previous report that came to this committee, and we endorsed the Angus Children's Rights Report. We have taken that information into a Tayside Summary for Children's Rights, and we're asking members to note the content of that report as well. So happy to take any questions.
Thank you, Kirsty. Do we have any questions on the report? Yeah, Councillor Devine.
Thanks, Convener. I've got a few actually. I just very much welcome it. But this is on the first part, page 79, 4.1.2. Pre-birth and early years, the amazing amount of work that's been done here will take quite a while to feed through into the whole system, of course. But while eligible 2-year-olds aren't actually being mentioned in this bit, I was wondering, just really for my own benefit, just what kind of monitoring there is going on there about language acquisition and development, because many years ago when we had the Dartington research programme, one of the things that hit me very much in the face was the poor language acquisition and development of a lot of our children. And let's face it, if they don't acquire the language, it's so much more difficult to read. It is a great basis for everything. So I was just wondering if you can't answer that just now, I quite understand because it's not in the report, but I would really appreciate knowing that, and maybe we could get some short report in the future on that.
Thanks, Councillor Devine. Absolutely not my area of expertise, but being involved in the collaborative, I can give you assurance that that's very much a priority for the new plan. There's recognition about key transition points for children and tracking through speech and language development and key developmental milestones. And you'll see when we bring the new plan for 2021 to 23 that features very significantly for the priority group 1. I don't know if any of my colleagues who are more versed in early years want to add to that, but it's certainly a significant priority for us as part of the trick.
No, that's fine. That's great.
Okay, we'll get that information out to the committee when we can. Your next question? Yeah.
Yeah, it's on the next part. This is, it's a really good report, and it gives us a tremendous overview of what's happening both individually in the councils and together in Tayside. So it means that we can see what's happening in other places, and maybe these things could be replicated in Angus. One of the ones I was thinking about on page 112 was a coordinator in each school for young carers. I think we do quite a lot for young carers in Angus, but it seems to me that a kind of go-to person in each school would be a great thing. It wouldn't cost any money. It would just be a bit of training for a member of staff, because I don't think there are huge numbers of young carers in each school. But it just struck me that this might be something that we could consider, and I would appreciate knowing if you think that might be the case. Then on page 113, we've got the Prepare pilot, which sounds as if it's done really well. So are we going to continue this and roll it out any further? And the last one, you'll be glad to know, is on page 118 about youth engagement. Many years ago, many years ago, I mean 15 or so years ago in Angus, there was a youth forum, and there was number 1 for Youth Drop-In Centre in Forfar, which I think went down really well. I was wondering within the youth engagement whether any desire for that kind of thing has come up from the young people. I still don't feel that we as councillors are getting enough engagement with young people. And it may be that in citizenship, in secondary, they could be more put in, not in touch with us, but given the opportunity to know who we are, what we're responsible for, and how they can contact us. Because I personally would really like to hear from young people about their concerns and any of their questions. It may be that through my views, we could get some of the information out to us, but I would really appreciate your thoughts on that. I don't know if that's going to be you, Kirsty, or somebody else.
Kelly,
it's a big one.
as well. Kelly McIntosh as well. Kirsty, you want to start off? Or?
I'll go first if that's okay. So your point, Councillor Devine, about a dedicated member of staff in school for care experienced children. Each of our schools has a designated manager for looked after children at the moment, who receives training from our education psychology team. So there is a single point of contact in each school, somebody with responsibility for that. And if I can touch on, I found it quite hard to keep track, that was a lot of information, but if I can touch on your third point about, I think it's Dundee Youth Voice, perhaps, that you were mentioning, and obviously we do have a forum in each of our schools where children and young people are listened to through their pupil council. And particularly in our secondary schools, there are other groups, groups in most of our secondary schools. There are eco groups in our secondary schools and our primary schools. So there are various ways in which our young people and our children can have their voices heard. But I absolutely take your point probably one of the things that we could improve is how they understand the governance in our local authority, especially our older young people. I know that you've brought this up before, so that's definitely something I would be willing to have a conversation about and look into further.
Yeah, I'd really appreciate that. I know that young people's voices are heard in lots of different forums, but as a councillor, they're not coming to me, and I would be very happy to meet with small groups of them or individuals or just emails, and that would be really helpful. It was actually about the young carers. I was thinking, not the looked after children or care experienced children, that I thought there might be a coordinator for, because they're quite specific, aren't they, what they're having to deal with.
So, Councillor Devine, in each of our schools, our pupil care and support staff members in secondary schools and our head teachers in primary schools would be responsible for young carers' statements. And we're just in the minute revising the policy and the strategy around that, and there's representation on that group, including young carers to do that. So the go-to person in the school, the young carers know who the identified person would be and would be responsible for looking at whether a young carer's statement is required or not. Apologies, frog in my throat.
Thank you.
That's fine, thank you.
Okay, we have Councillor Brays next, please.
Yes, thanks, Convener. My question was about my views, which is on page 121 of the report, launched in April 2020, and I just wondered how it's going, really, how much engagement we're getting through it, and if we consider that it's been a success.
Thank you for that question. So we took the opportunity to launch it at that time. We knew it was a little bit of a gamble, given that coincided with lockdown. And what we realised with launching it, you know, at a distance, if you like, is that we haven't had the engagement that we would have liked. Now, again, going back to young people who co-produced this with us, are telling us they do need a bit of support to set this up. They want the adults to take responsibility for that. So what we've done is, over the last 4 months, is we have rolled out quite a comprehensive programme of awareness raising, together with some young people who've been interested in this. And we've seen the use of my views at this point, Councillor Brays, increase quite significantly. So we have essentially relaunched it, and we will be bringing 6 monthly reports through Integrated Children's Services, which will include not only the numbers of returns, but some of the key messages that young people are happy to share with corporate parents about what they would like to see improving and changing.
Well, thank you very much for that. That's an excellent reply. Thanks.
Thank you, Councillor Brace. We have Mr. Summers. Mr. Summers, are you there? Still signalling on mute. We'll give him a couple of seconds more and see if it comes on. Ah, here he is.
Okay, now.
Yeah,
my apologies. My browser doesn't support all the facilities on Microsoft Teams. It's the first time I've used it. 2 brief points then, if I may, Convener.
Sure.
One, to back up what Councillor Devine was saying a moment ago. Yes, of course, young people are unlikely to actually directly approach councillors, but in my experience, it's a hugely enriching occasion when a councillor can get together with a pupil council, and the more that you people can manage to do that, I would have thought on an annual basis in all the schools, then that is an excellent good practice. My second point, not to trivialise this, but on page 101, Webster's High School is in Kirriemuir, not Forfar. And you wouldn't want to, in such an important report as this, to cause any offence.
Thank you for pointing that out, Mr. Summers.
Absolutely. Thank you. I wonder, Councillor Wan, if you're happy for me to respond to the other 2 points that were raised.
Yeah, sure.
So thank you, Councillor Devine, for highlighting Prepare. It's certainly a piece of work and a pilot that we're very proud of, and that 10 families that were involved in that have given us really quite excellent feedback. In terms of your question about whether we are going to roll that out, then the answer is yes, and that we're working on that at the moment in terms of bringing strength-based practice and solution-focused approaches into how we work in child protection. So we will be rolling out Prepare for at least some families coming to Child Protection Case Conference from around September time. So thank you for that. I would like to also just remind members, it might be helpful too, about some of the key messages we've had from some of our care experienced young people about consultation and engagement and what's important to them. And the 2 things that they have asked us to bear in mind are opportunities, and those are opportunities to engage with us as corporate parents. But really importantly, the environment that's important for them, because environments where we're comfortable and would like to engage with young people are not environments that they are supportive of. So they're asking us and challenging us. And those are some strong messages I think some members here got from our young people when we got together with them and felt a little bit uncomfortable playing walking football and touch rugby and making pizzas and things that we have done pre-COVID. Is the message that is so important, is how we engage with young people in terms of creating opportunities that are right for them and environments that work for them. So didn't want to miss the opportunity to share their voice here today.
Thank you, Kirsty. I don't know if we felt uncomfortable going to these events. I certainly didn't, but I've been told I'm a big kid at heart. Councillor Devine, I think you enjoyed it as well, didn't you?
Yeah.
The rugby and that, yeah.
I did.
Yeah. So
apart from falling down.
Yeah, of course. Right, we have 2 recommendations on that paper. If everybody has finished with any questions and comments, I take it that's just Mr. Summers still got his hand up, but is that a legacy hand? Possibly. Yeah.
Legacy.
Yeah.
Apologies.
Okay, no problem. Okay, recommendations. We have 2. Number 1, approve the annual report on the Tayside Plan for Children, Young People and Families. That's 2019 to 2020. And number 2, note the Tayside Children's Rights Summary Report of 17 to 2020. Is that agreed?
Agreed.
Thank you very much for attending. That's the end of the meeting. Thank you.
Thank
Bye.
you.
Thank you, Chair.
Thanks.